Welcome to the Personal Brain Trainer Podcast. I'm Dr. Erica Warren.
And I'm Darius and we're your hosts. Join us on an adventure to translate the scientific jargon and brain research into simple metaphors and stories you can use in everyday life.
We explore topics that help you turbocharge your mind and steer around the invisible barriers so that you can achieve your goals. This podcast is brought to you by GoodSensoryLearning.com, where you can find educational and occupational therapy lessons and remedial materials that bring delight to learning. Finally, you can find Dr. Warren's many courses at LearningSpecialistCourses.com. Come check out our newest course on developing executive functions and study strategies.
This podcast is brought to you by Bullet Map Academy. We help children and adults organize their thoughts creatively and unlock their dyslexia's potential with the world's first online dyslexia school for study skills. Hey Erica, from my garden office here with the birds in the background, what are we going to talk about today?
Hey Darius, we're going to be talking about our personal executive functioning hacks for inhibitory control.
Yeah, because last week we did working memory and we're following the three-part process, three main elements of executive function: working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. So inhibitory control, why don't you give us a quick overview of what inhibitory control is before we go into the hacks?
Inhibitory control is really your ability to inhibit what's going on around you so that you can focus your attention. It also has to do with emotional regulation as well. So it's kind of everything to do with attention. It also has to do with metacognition. So what kind of hacks do we have to help us to manage our attention, manage our emotions, and help us with metacognition?
It's interesting that every time we talk about this, it's like we walk around the topic and get a 360 and you move from a slightly different angle and look at it from another angle. And it's like a scanner. You build up a bigger picture and a bigger understanding of it. And it just made me realize, for me, inhibitory control is all about focus. What you mute out and what you zoom in on and focus. But then when you think about emotions, inhibitory control and emotions, can you call that focus? Can you focus your emotions?
You can manage your emotions.
Yes.
You can manage your emotions. And we've talked about this before, that kind of 90-second rule of where you're stuck in an emotion. And it might be a very negative emotion. You might be very angry. But actually, that emotion will only last. It's a chemical response in our body. It only lasts 90 seconds unless we feed it. But the other interesting thing about that emotional control is another piece that I really love that's in the research, and I've found it even personally to be extraordinarily beneficial, is that sometimes we're in the emotion. And if you want to step out of that emotion, you label it. Just by labeling it, you're not the emotion, you're observing the emotion. And as soon as you're observing the emotion, you have more control, inhibitory control, to be able to reason with that emotion, reason with it, and decide whether it's worth staying in that emotion or whether it's worth exiting.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of like, oh, I'm feeling angry now. Why am I feeling angry? Or whatever. Just by labeling it gives you more control over it, or maybe pushes you up to the meta level of metacognition and makes you start observing it rather than being in it, lifts you above it. Yeah. Fantastic. So hack number 1 is label what you're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it really works for me. But it's interesting because if you label it for somebody else, sometimes that feels judgy and they're going to go even deeper into the emotion. So what I've found, another hack, is to check with that person to find out what words are comfortable for them. So for example, I can remember at one point mentioning to somebody that it seems like you're really angry. That didn't work. But the word grumpy worked. They're like, oh, I'm comfortable with that. So being comfortable with that word is really important, because then you can communicate with that person. And I know even for myself, that's a word that I'll use. I'll say like, wow, I'm feeling really grumpy, but you really feel a shift. You feel a really significant shift when you say, wow, I'm feeling grumpy, because then you're using that kind of metacognition, and it really does give you an out. And then of course, waiting that 90 seconds. Even one of my students, she said, we watched your little 90-second video, and she said, that was really helpful because this little girl made me really angry in class. And she said, I counted 90 seconds. And she said, oh, I felt so much better.
Wow. So, okay, let's just get super practical on this, because we're going to go to other hacks like time blocking and calendars and reminders and so on. But actually, it's fascinating that inhibitory control, the whole emotional aspect is so important to it all, as well as the focus aspect. In that scenario, you feel something, you allow yourself to feel it for the 90 seconds, and while you're feeling it, you label it.
Well, okay, that's interesting. You allow yourself to feel it for the 90 seconds while you're still in that wash. But as long as you're thinking about it, you're reactivating it, and that's another 90 seconds.
Okay.
So as long as you're in it, you're going to stay in it.
Yeah.
The only way to get out of it is to not think about it for 90 seconds.
One of the commitments we make in this podcast is to try and turn things into understandable metaphors. And the metaphor I'm seeing here is it's like a wave. Okay, if you're surfing or you're in the sea, you can go out to the sea, you experience an emotion. It's a wave, it's going to crash, it's going to hit you, and it's going to pass. And the key thing is how you respond to that wave. Do you plant your feet? Do you turn your back? Do you allow yourself to swim over it? Do you dive through it? There's responses to those waves of emotions. And so sort of inhibitory control is kind of like, could be the term of how do you surf those waves, or how do you, respond to the waves of emotions that come.
Right. And I think it's funny, I often use that metaphor of the ocean. And, when you're really stuck in emotion, you're kind of in the ocean, but you can pull yourself up onto a boat or a surfboard. And when you pull yourself above it, then you're able to manage it. You're able to use your metacognitive skills to ride the wave in an appropriate way so you can get to where you want to go.
Oh, can I segue then to a raft? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get really practical. I'm going to share some of my hacks. I explain mind mapping to my students as if mind mapping is like a raft. Okay. So imagine you have to swim through. You go to school and you're taught how to swim, how to read, how to write. These are reading and writing, swimming through information. But I don't resonate with lots of written words or lots of writing. So I like to map. And for me, mapping is like a raft. I can go onto it, I can doodle, I can draw branches, etc. I can connect everything, and it's a tool that helps me float on this ocean of information, And so in a way, with inhibitory control, we often need tools that help us navigate that water, whether it's a raft or a paddle board or a motorboat or whatever it is you're choosing as your tool. So what kind of tools do you use, Erica? What are your hacks for inhibitory control?
Popping up for me in this moment is physical hacks, in the sense of, I face a wall. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of visual noise around me. However, I do have a window that brings in a lot of light above me. The light is important. I'm also looking up slightly at my screen, which is also supposed to benefit because it keeps you alert and awake. So I can look through the window, but I only see the treetops. And there are not a lot of distractions there. It's just kind of actually a nice place to look if I want to be thinking, so to speak. And then, on either side, I don't have a lot of movement or issues. And that really helps me big time because it really limits the amount of particularly visual noise. Auditory noise I deal with because I'm in one end of my house. I can shut my door. I put my dogs outside. I turn off the doggy doorbell. I let everybody know if there are people around, I'm going in. Please don't disturb me. So, there are a lot of kind of those physical and preparing the environment. When we do these podcasts, I have to make sure that I unplug Alexa, that I turn off my notifications. Even then you'll every now and then hear a little bleep. I'm like, oh, where did that come from? You know what I mean? So it's hard to completely turn everything off, but the more you can turn off, the better. I think because you really want to be unitasking. You don't want to be multitasking. Anytime you're multitasking or you have visual or auditory distractions, it's really going to get in the way.
So we got a bunch of things we've brainstormed. I'm just going to rattle through them so listeners can see what's coming up. We've got time blocking, using a calendar, having
Stop there.
reminders.
What is time blocking?
I absolutely love time blocking. Time blocking is simply blocking out a certain amount of time on your calendar. So the principle is if it's not scheduled, it won't get done. And the principle of time blocking is that to-do lists don't help you get stuff done. They help you remember what to get done, but time blocking and your calendar does. So I think a 25-minute time block's a very helpful space of time. It's a Pomodoro technique where you chunk something down into a block of time that you can get done within that period of time. You put it in your calendar and then you've got your commitments for the day and you know that they're manageable.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think the key word there is commitment, that you're making a commitment. Because, sometimes I'll just be bopping around from thing to thing on my to-do list, but that's not always very efficient. What's better is to really block a very specific time for a very specific thing and not try to, if you're on your way to go do something, don't let those other things that pop up pull you away from that commitment.
Yeah. So it's like making an appointment with yourself. And I think calendar is very important for me. I don't want to come across like I'm super organized. I am definitely not. I do the minimum organization required not to let people down, basically. But I find my calendar really more and more useful all the time. And it's an effort of will for me to use the calendar. I forget to use the calendar. And a lot of my clients, I help people, adults with dyslexia and ADHD in the UK here and America, but we forget to even open up our calendar. And sometimes it's like you need a calendar notification which says open calendar and read at like 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 a.m. or something. And it doesn't alert and you're like, oh yeah, I better open up my calendar and read it. I've gone to the next level. I've got a personal assistant who I sit down with at 9:45 every day and just go for 15 minutes or 7 minutes and just say, what are my tasks? What are my calendar? And I hate doing it. I love, it's great doing it with her, but it's not natural for me. I'm a natural improviser, but there's a limit to how much you can cast off inhibitory control and just improvise as you go along. Because one of the things that I find is I often forget to do the things I really want to do. And it's the tyranny of the urgent, isn't it? The loudest shouting thing gets, the squeaky wheel gets oiled, the thing that shouts the most gets dealt with, but what's important often gets overlooked. And this leads me on to the Eisenhower matrix. I mean, do you use the Eisenhower matrix? Have you ever heard of it?
I'm thinking of a matrix, but I don't know if it's the same one. What do you think?
So President Eisenhower, when he organized his time, he would have 4 segments and he would say, important or not important was the main divider. Okay, is this important or is this not important? And then he would decide, is it important and urgent or is it important and not urgent? And then there's other things that are not important and urgent and not important and not urgent, you know? And when
Right. So it's the 4 blocks. And it's so interesting.
4 blocks.
The one that I'm thinking of is that urgent or not urgent, and then don't want to do, want to do.
Ah, yes, yes.
So the things that you don't want to do and are urgent, you have to do first.
Oh, okay.
So
Yes.
it's very similar matrix,
Yes.
and it's the same idea. But taking that time to look through your list and prioritizing, that's why I like to use Google Keep, because it enables you to kind of pin very quickly or move your tasks around so that you can prioritize them. Oh, a lot of them. TickTick does that. I'm sure you have some other.
Yeah, I use Asana at the moment. I mean, it's not perfect, but I use Asana. And so I've got my inbox in Asana. And then from my inbox, I have 4 categories of important, urgent, important, not urgent, not important and urgent. I still haven't found very many things that are not important and urgent. But those are normally, yeah, anyway. Yeah, that's time blocking, calendars, and
Wait, I've got to give a shout out to Google Calendar.
oh, yes.
I've fallen in love with it. I've absolutely fallen in love with it because they've made it better.
Yeah.
I abandoned it for a long time. These little features that make me so happy.
Oh, go tell.
First of all, it shows you time within the calendar. So it draws a little red line of what time it is in your calendar. And you can turn this feature on or have it off. But when the time goes through the calendar, everything that you finished changes to a lighter color. And that just makes me so happy. I mean, I have everything color coded, which is just another huge hack for me, because I can see very quickly, I have my online sessions are one color, my in-person sessions are another, my appointments are another. I have lots of different, and it looks really pretty. And somehow it takes something that's very visually overwhelming if it's all one color and makes it not overwhelming at all, because it really pulls it apart and makes it very logical for me. So color coding is a huge hack on Google Calendar. But and now that you can actually schedule Zoom calls and then somebody will send me an appointment. If I haven't agreed that I'm going to be attending, it outlines it. And when you agree that you're attending, it fills it in.
Yes.
I'm like, wow, this is too awesome. Yes. I love it. I love it. What are the features that you like?
Well, I was with a coaching client yesterday and I was teaching her how to do time blocking on the iPad. And she's a complete Mac user. And she's like, I use Mac Calendar. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. And I said, do you use the alerts much? And she says, well, no, not really. Sometimes I forget to do it. Well, let's just set them onto automatic. And we put them onto automatic. And that's super important, I would say. Create automatic alerts in your calendar. So whenever you open up, make an event, there's automatically an alert. But I realize Apple only allows you one automatic alert, whereas Google allows you multiple alerts. So it will alert you the day before, an hour before, 3 minutes before, or whatever combination you want. And I tend to have it an alert 10 minutes before and an alert 3 minutes before, because my timekeeping's a little bit off. And so that 3 minutes before is saying to me, right, you really need to start, getting into the zone right now, rather than, oh yeah, I'll go do that in a few minutes and I'll be back. And then I get caught up in something with my distractive mind. So I find the alerts in Google Calendar really good.
Oh, the other thing that's really cool, I have to give a shout out to, which is a great hack for some people on Google Keep, which works brilliantly with Google Calendar, by the way, and with Google Docs. All of these, you can kind of open them at the same time in the margins. It's really wonderful. But Google Keep has this feature where you can get reminders based on time or location.
Yeah, that is powerful. So when you go to the front door or you're just about to walk out the door, it'll ping up and say, have you got your bag, your phone, your rucksack, and your keys?
Yeah, or if you're driving by the grocery store, you'll get a pop-up. Get the Coca-Cola, or why did I say that? I hate Coca-Cola. Get the peas, get the potatoes. sorry, Coca-Cola, but not a fan.
Yeah, so I want to talk back to your physical thing because there are all sorts of tools out there to help you maintain your focus. And one of those tools, I think, is clothing.
Oh, so
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when you put certain clothes on, your whole mindset and mood can change. Like if I'm go into woodwork mode and I put my woodwork trousers on and I've got my belt clip on and I've got my tools on, I'm like in the woodworking zone. I'm going to get stuff done. It's something about the physical stuff stirs up emotions, focuses you, gets you in another zone. If you put on really comfy, soft shoes and you start padding around the house, it shifts your focus. If you put on tight shoes, not really tight shoes, but your work shoes or something that you associate with going out the door and doing something, I think shoes really affect your focus in some ways. And your clothes, the type of shirts you wear, the type of trousers you wear, etc., changes your mood and attention, I think, or helps to.
That's really interesting. And the other thing that pops up for me is really establishing a routine, because it's so easy just to jump out of bed and just run from one distraction to the next. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I've got to do this. And you're just kind of switchbacking all over the place and you're getting kind of things half done. But when you establish and also establishing a routine where you're doing things to activate and get yourself ready for the day, I really need to do that. And I am a little bit off and I'm like prepared to sit down and create that daily. I don't like the word routine. What would be a better word for it? Rhythm. So, yeah, just something that gets me activated. Like I should be having a big glass of water every morning. I should be going out and doing my forward ambulation outside and getting light and activating my brain, which also then deactivates the amygdala for the day. So there are a number of things that you can do. You can sit down and read a little bit of a book that really empowers you and gets you set for the day. I like to use Mark Nepo. I love his poetry and I love his books. Just reading a little bit of Mark Nepo and getting that nugget that just really gets me motivated for the day. So I think, establishing some kind of routine of sorts that is healthy to get you kind of prepared and in the right mindset so that you can be focused and you can walk through your day with intention. Don't just kind of just jump from distraction to distraction. And if you don't have that routine, it's very easy for things to just be scattered.
Yes. We've got so many different tools and techniques we can talk about, and we've got technology we can talk about as well. We've talked about Asana and Google and so on. There's just so much within inhibitory control that I think one of the things that a lot of my clients love when I introduced it to them is working with a split screen. And we talked about that in working memory, but this also applies to inhibitory control, because when you're working with a split screen, it's helping your working memory because you're not having to remember you're taking one thing from one screen and applying it to the other. That's working memory. But it also helps with inhibitory control because it's really clear what your focus is on this one thing in front of you, and there's a process. You're going from one side to the other. You may be reading some websites and taking notes. I sometimes split screen Asana with my calendar, so I take a task and put it in my calendar and so on. That whole thing aids in inhibitory control for me.
Oh, can I add something to that? I love with the split screen. I like to have Google Docs and a thesaurus.
Yeah, you and your thesaurus, that's just incredible. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I would say, do you know what my thesaurus is? Google Images.
Google Images. How is that a
Yeah,
thesaurus?
it's a visual thesaurus. So I would put the thing that I'm thinking about into Google Images. So, for example, if I'm mind mapping and I'm thinking, I want to somehow visualize this, and visualizing it really helps me. And I often can't picture it, which is really weird. I love visualizing things. I love the visual side of things, but sometimes I just can't see it. And so I go to Google Images and I say, breadcrumb trail line art. And, I had this thing, breadcrumb trail of ideas, line art. And then I see this dot of lines connected or bread or something. I go, yeah, of course, and that helps me. So I regard that as a visual thesaurus, as it were.
That's so interesting. I love that, to really activate your visualization, because again, visualization is so incredibly helpful. It's helpful for working memory because it's one of those vital pieces, but it helps for attention.
It does.
So it's vital for inhibitory control. So it's very important. That's another great hack, that we're visualizing. And if you have a hard time visualizing, then find those images to help you. And sometimes we're trying to visualize things that are abstract.
Yes.
And we can't, like, well, how do you visualize that? But it's amazing how, you're right. In Google, and you look at images, you'll be like, oh, that's a cool way of visualizing it.
Yes.
I really like that. Or YouTube, watching a video. But it's great if you're a student and you're learning about a historical period.
Of course. Yes. You're
Because
right.
then you can really review ancient Egypt, and then it gets those visuals going, so that when you go to class, you're like, oh, I already have visuals to attach to what you're talking about.
Well, I've got a really oblique inhibitory control hack. Okay. Now, I've definitely got some ADHD of some sort, undiagnosed as yet. But when I take notes in a lecture, I can get easily distracted. So I have to have something that is so all-encompassing for me that it uses all of my attention and extra attention. And for me, that is live mind mapping the talk. I teach my students how to do it, and I just realized that what happens is that when you're live mapping a talk and you're kind of forcing yourself to translate it into doodles and drawings and connections and so on, you're not just listening, you're engaging all of your brain, that when it gets boring, I maintain my concentration because it's this tool that is focusing me rather than the speaker. And I can see other people are fading out, but I'm still in the zone. And so it helps me with my working memory because I get all the information down instantly. And it helps me stay focused with inhibitory control. I do 3-hour lectures sometimes, and I can map the whole thing from start to finish, and I am focused all the way through because I'm doing this drawing and doodling and so on. And so for me, inhibitory control is quite a broad range, isn't it?
It is. And I have to bring up one other one before our time is over that is so important. A great hack, particularly for kids in the classroom, are FM systems. And these are systems that actually create that place a microphone under the teacher and sends the audio directly to the students so that it's louder. There are not as many auditory distractions between where the teacher is and where they are. And just having that clear audio can be really, really helpful. And then, of course, you can always use, which is a similar hack, noise canceling. Airpods or headphones can help to block out any of those distractions, because some people are really distracted by noises. And then there are those that will blare music. And you're like, well, how could that help? Because it blocks out unexpected noise, because it's the unexpected noise that is distracting for some people. I personally can't have music on. That's distracting for me. But for other people, I'll never forget the student I had that listened to heavy metal. And he said, that's what works for me. And I was like, I don't believe you. And we put it on And he showed me, and I was like, that's amazing, because I have no idea what you just did because I'm so distracted. But it's very individualized. And it's very, very common for people to push what works for them on others and not be open to something that doesn't work for them. And so it's really, really important that if you are trying to help your students or your children or your partner, that you give them the flexibility to have their own hacks, because they may not be the same as yours.
Yeah, and these hacks are super important even in the workplace. I mean, inhibitory control in the workplace is key. And we should do a specific talk about Zoom and executive function. Doing Zoom calls and executive function, because I've got thoughts on sound quality, the visuals, sharing, all the different dynamics that happen within Zoom, and how to do executive function within a virtual environment is a whole nother realm in and of itself. You know, where the camera's positioned, where are you looking, where are they looking, eye contact, all sorts of stuff we should talk about as well.
Oh, why don't we do that in our next episode?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's zoom into Zoom.
Yeah, zoom into Zoom. And let's do a second part on this as well. You know, a follow-on part for this. This has been a short half-hour session today. We'd normally go for another 15 minutes, but I have a meeting with an app developer in a few minutes' time. So we'll do a part 2 on this one.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I love the idea of zooming into Zoom, because I think that's also going to trigger all sorts of other hacks.
Yes, we'll really get into the tech. Executive function in the online world. How about we do that? So it's not just Zoom, but it's other stuff that happens working remotely. Executive function and remote work. How about we do that?
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Great. Well, see you next week for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Erica. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining our conversation here at the Personal Brain Trainer Podcast. This is Dr. Erica Warren.
And this is Darius Nomderon. You can check out our show notes for links to resources mentioned in the podcast. And please leave us a review and share us on social media. Just take a screenshot and post it up on your social. And until next time, see ya.